Evening.
All right, cool. How you doing, man?
Good.
Your mic's going. Your
You can't
mic's
hear
going
me?
a little. Yeah, your mic's just having a little bit of a draft, like just a little bit though. Just letting you know about that. Mm-hmm.
Is it better or no? I'll
Yeah,
just
that's
say.
better. That's better.
Alright, cool.
Okay, so as you were saying.
Well, my thing is theology, creation,
Mm-hmm.
God, of course, the Bible.
Uh-huh.
I listen to a lot of debates, atheists versus
Mm-hmm.
Christians, so I know their arguments.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, one thing that I thought was interesting is that you said that no atheist would ever say that evolution is a fact or real in any real debate platform. I
yeah,
would
never
beg
heard it.
I would beg to disagree because while it's true that atheism and science are not necessarily connected, there is no reason to say that an atheist wouldn't say that the scientific theory of evolution, which in fact is actually proven, is true or isn't true or is true. My
And
bad.
about the thing under the lines of evolution, they have like five different kinds, micro, macro, that are all contradictory
Mm,
to each other. There's
Well,
one that
not
lines.
not necessarily, because if you go by natural selection, which is another theory of evolution, which has been proven true, it's not
Yeah, I agree
contradictory at
with that.
all. And well, there you go. Then there's no reason why someone who happened to be atheist who knew about natural selection would say that evolution wasn't real, because in that sense, it does exist.
Well, there's certain parts of it that are on the side of the creationists believe things remain its kind in natural selection and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. Things remain their kind since humans have observed. But I won't go with the Darwinian theory that wasn't observed with the pond scum and lightning hitting the water or whatever on the
Well,
rocks
Charles
theory.
Darwin was the one who discovered the natural selection, though.
That's fine, but he's also been wrong about many things. His top
Well,
Princeton scholar has a book called Darwin on Trial, all his flaws.
Well, that's fine, but regardless of what he was wrong in other previous ones, it's a fact that he wasn't wrong in natural selection.
Yeah,
Just
because he
simply
had.
because someone is wrong in one aspect, or even if you found someone who is wrong in 10 million aspects, but was still right in one aspect, even if it's just one, then if you're talking about that aspect, then he was right.
Yeah, but I believe natural selection can be observed, and what he's seen
Mm-hmm.
with the what was it on the island there was just adaptation with the bird beaks. We agree
Mm-hmm.
with that. That takes an intelligent designer to have people adapt to their areas or
Well,
survival on this planet.
that's the claim that that's by a creator, but there's no evidence of said creator. All that is proof is that it did naturally evolve. Whether you believe it to be the contribution of a creator or it just happening by itself through chance or nature is completely up to you.
How we put into the chance number,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the human enzyme. The professor out of Cardin said the human enzyme happening by random or chance comes down to
Mm-hmm.
zero. The
Well,
complexity of it.
not necessarily, because if you can't prove that it was in fact of a creator and the possibility of it being of random or chance, then there's always a percentage. You could argue that it's low or that it's near impossible, and even necessarily that's debatable, but you could make that observation. But there's no objective way, if you can't prove the creator in general, that it's a zero chance that it could be um, by chance or by possible.
Yeah, and he said by the chance number was some how many atoms there are in the universe. It was just some number that was just insane. And then you got Isaac Newton, who said the sun and moon are a perfect distance, so we don't burn or heat up. That did not happen by chance. There's a whole by
Hmm.
scientists, the book of chance and how chance really it's more evidence leaning on intelligence making this intelligent design than
It's not
not.
evidence towards a designer. It's you can try to use science to support your theory of a creator, but science does not point to a creator in general. In fact, science, if we go historically, science and religion actually, or theology, we should say, actually butt heads many times. Where, like for example, the time when um, the Christian in the 13th century when Christian dominated. in Christian-dominated Europe, it was generally believed that the Earth was at the center of the universe, and this was believed due to the lack of the science of astrology. And once astrology was discovered and scientists made observations that proved that the Earth was not, in fact, at the center of the Earth, as theology claimed, they
Not
actually
my
faced
theology.
it, it's irrelevant. I'm talking about
Well, I
actual
know it was the
instance.
Bible that
Mhm.
actually showed the world was a sphere first, not flat. But keep
And
going.
that's also not true because the way the Earth was found out to not be a sphere is due to the fact that actually many books actually claimed that the Earth was flat and that gods would descend and devour on you if you cross that path. So to say that
Yeah,
a
the
book,
Babylonian gods. Yeah.
right? So to say a Bible actually showed the Earth was a sphere is not true.
Well,
The
in Job, it's
actuality of the
supported.
scientists.
The meaning in Hebrew, it's in Job, but how they describe it. But
Hmm.
I would just also just say like the early, whether they were Christian or not, they believed in a designer, Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, a lot of the early science fathers. The one of what's that called? Quantum mechanics. The father of quantum mechanics believed in
Hmm.
intelligent design.
And that's
Um,
perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine if scientists believe in a divine creator or what have you. I'm all for everyone believing what they want to believe, but the fact of the matter is they don't know that for a fact and they can't prove it. And that's where I say know that believing in a God is fine, believing in a divine creator, use whatever logic, hell, even try to use science to, justify your claim. But the fact remains is you can neither prove nor disprove that a God in fact exists.
all right, so let's say there is this middle ground
Okay?
on your side and my side. I would definitely argue that the intelligent design leans more with evidence than your side.
Well, my side exists on the fact that you can't prove it. Your side exists on, well, we can show science through evolution as evidence that it was by a creator. Now, while it is definitely evidence that the creation itself is in fact a highly complex and intelligent design of its own, you cannot prove that it was done by a creator of any kind. That's where the unknown, or aka the unprovable, or the X comes into place. Where, if we go in mathematical terms, you have A, which is nature, and you have B, evolution, that has the scientific nature, that has the scientific progression of nature, aka its mutation, its evolution. But then you have X, which you use as logic to equal X, the unknown creator that you can't prove. This is the logical, scientific, theological conclusion that you are making. And my whole point of it is to say that although we do have A, we do have C, we do have B, you can't use A and B to say that this is evidence for C because a God is not provable.
Well, I think his design is it's right in our face that's the proof.
You No, you have truth that nature is a design of its own, and you have truth that evolution exists. You do not, however, have truth that it is done purposely or for a design. If you don't know who the creator is or that there's even proof of a creator, then I can equally say that it's highly logical that it could be nature doing it itself, not having any interference with anything at all, just by itself. Not necessarily through random chance, but through its own natural force of will, through its own evolution, which by nature is uncontrollable and unpredictable.
Well, it depends what evolution you're talking about.
Natural selection, of course.
Well, we're not talking about the one with the monkey. You know that, right?
No, natural selection is basically where, let's say you have an animal that is predominantly found in a forest, right? So it
Yeah.
requires a dense environment in order to survive. And then you have the opposite of its environment, like Iceland, for example. It could not survive in below freezing weather, or um, that is the natural evolutionary theory, and the way to prove it is basically if you were to put that animal outside of its natural geographical inhabitant and threw it out into that cold, blistering wasteland, and if it died, then your theory that it can only survive in said environment is correct, thereby proving natural selection. If it survives, then that means that it has evolved from its natural habitat to adopt to a new environment in which it can now thrive, multiply, and survive, thus once again proving natural selection.
All right. I just disagree with the randomness and chaos fine tuning stuff from the atheism.
Well,
Especially
atheism just means you don't believe in God.
no, I know, but Darwinian atheism
There's
is
no such
least
thing. Simply be,
Darwinianism.
Darwinianism is a real thing, but there's no such thing as a Darwinian atheism. Atheism is simply the lack of belief in God, and if you agree with Darwin's theories of evolution, all that means is that you are an atheist who is aware of what Darwin's theories of evolution are, and you're aware of how natural selection works and how it actually is, because contrary to the term theories of evolution, evolution itself is not a theory. We only have theories on how evolution works, but evolution itself is testable, observable, and proven.
Yeah, but there's 5 different ones.
It doesn't matter. It's still proven through natural selection in other areas. Like even geographical isolation, separation, evolution is proven true. Are you aware of
Yeah.
that evolutionary theory?
When we're in natural selection, I think the stuff that is based upon science like that and doesn't go against God or the Bible is
It doesn't
one.
prove God either.
Oh, I'm not saying
And
for your
mhm,
view I won't, but I'm just saying as we're talking about it that what's under the label
mhm,
evolution. I mean, you know,
mhm.
uh, it's just many things goes into it, and there's some blind spots because there's been books against Darwin proving a lot of things wrong, and so it's a
Right,
fine line.
but you're using non how should I say this? You're using non-related subjects about Darwin's character, falsehoods, and other contradictions, which have nothing to do with the actual theories of evolution that he proved correct.
And what branch or name of evolution would go under the monkey and the man type of theory?
That would be microevolution or macro.
Micro.
I can't really remember if it's micro or macro.
Yeah, because it's either micro or macro. I get mixed up.
Yeah, I
That
get mixed up with that as well.
there's ones that like Christians agree with, and there's one that they totally disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's a bit confusing because it's the branches there.
Mm-hmm.
But like from Lee Strobel, who used to be an atheist, he said looking at the doctrine of Darwinism, which undergirded my atheism for so many years, it didn't take long to conclude that it was simply too far-fetched to be credible. I realized that if I were to embrace Darwinism, I was undergirding the premise of naturalism.
And it's not necessarily Darwinism. Darwinism actually, believe it or not, refers to actually doesn't even refer to evolution itself. Darwinism itself is basically the idea, it's attributed to survival of the fittest, basically. So basically, if you are Darwinistic, that means in your social view of life, it's actually more political than scientific. And basically, it would be like, okay, like we have a society where you have, laws and everything protecting you. Well, Darwinism believes that you should survive by your own will alone, that you shouldn't have other people protecting you, and that might makes right, essentially. So that's what Darwinism really
Yeah,
is.
I heard of that. Yeah, but
Yeah,
I
that's.
think I also thought it fell into what Lee's probably mentioned too is definitely in the no observable evidence of the origin or the monkey part thing. We do know the Y chromosome and
No,
chimps and humans are totally different.
Darwin is credited for discovering many fascinating facts about evolution and coming up with incredible theories of evolution. But Darwinism is completely a separate thing. That was basically Darwin's social views on life, as opposed to any natural theory. And even evolution itself is not necessarily attributed to Darwin himself, because there were many scientists historically who worked on the theories of evolution. And scientists in his time did have an inkling of what evolution was. They just had the idea that um, they just didn't have an explanation as to why some animals died while others didn't, and they mostly attributed it to divinity or just because. And Darwin endeavored to find out how and why. And what he concluded was the reason why animals died off naturally while others thrived was in the very genetics, was the fact that some could adapt and some could not. Hence why you have natural selection. He also theorized that why some animals are in the same family category but are completely separate species. And the conclusion he got from it during his travels was that they had, due to the geography itself, lied in the answer. So basically, if you had a species of squirrels who roamed an area at one point, but then tectonic faults happened or geographical separation happens to where 50-50 was split 50-50, geographically separated from each other to where they're no longer connected. This would force them to this would force this now separated group from the originals to eventually breed amongst themselves, which would formulate new species of squirrels that were completely different from their originals due to the fact that they were no longer part of the original group. And this was also proven true.
Mm.
It's even socially, it's actually proven true. Like you can even find it in human behavior. Like for example, and this has a bit to do with political, but it does kind of support the theory of geographical isolation, evolution. Basically, you could look at the American people, for example, when we were a colony of Great Britain, 17 like 18th century United States, we were predominantly British. We identified as British. Our entire society was based on British laws and Commonwealth and how we acted. Then, after following the victories of the American independence, and we separated from Great Britain over the period of 200 and dissolved all political bands and all political ties with the political and cultural ties with Great Britain. We formulated our own people to where we now identify as American with our own culture, beliefs, and society that is completely separate from our originals, which would be the British.
Yeah.
And it's a clear example of geographical isolation, evolution, although it's more of a political one rather than an evolutionary one. And it could be considered evolutionary if you call it by society.
Well, that still seems to fit in the realm of whatever which one, the micro or the one that agrees more on the natural selection. The
Mm-hmm.
side I agree with, what you just stated, what you just said, it'd probably line up more with that, right?
Mm-hmm. Geographical isolation.
Yeah, I mean the stuff in there I would agree with,
Mm-hmm.
especially it's just the far out stuff when they have to hide behind time for the origin thing, and the pond scum thing is just that
Pond
takes
scum.
faith.
Um, Pond scum and origin. Well, here's the thing: is as an atheist, you don't believe in God, so anything in origins you can believe in as long as you don't believe it was attributed to a god.
No, I know, and I can make the argument that they believe they came from a rock. I believe it came from an intelligent designer. I believe his intelligence is shown on his creation.
And I can argue back that all of this is just a belief. None of us know for a fact, and so therefore all we have is theory. So what you believe as a theist and what someone like me believes as an atheist towards creation and how everything came to be, regardless if we disagree of it being of a god or not, would be equally possible no matter what because there's no evidence for either or. Hence why it's a belief. You can't
Mm.
prove you can't prove you can't prove that your God that you worship did it, and I can't prove that we came from nothing. We can't prove anything in origins or creation. We only had not scientifically, not factually, not theoretically, and not in reality. All we have is our working theories that we have, which is basically just
No.
another educated way for belief.
Mm. Well, I'm just saying, I think from watching a lot of the debates when I was just, not sold out to anything really, but watching worldviews debates, and it was the Christians with intelligent design and other stuff on the table that,
Hmm.
atheism, since they don't have a real foundation of belief, didn't have much legs to stand on. They made some good points here and there, but I see
I
the
can
Christian world.
see I can see having many ways to stand up against it, on the basis that um, intelligent design, no matter what science you try to put on it, and no matter what you try to prove, oh, this world is so beautiful. Look how complex genetics are, etc., etc. How can you say that it was all by chance or whatever? I can say it could be all by chance because you can't prove a creator did it.
Yeah, and if you took all the things by chance and look at the slim numbers, slim numbers, slim numbers, slim numbers on all the
The
things
chance
by
still
chance,
exists. The
I
chance
know,
still
but
exists.
still, you're gonna have to pick a side, and the side is saying this happened by chance is really out there. You're way on left field on many things by chance. The logic would go with, well, there's an intelligence to this design.
Well, logically, and which again, logic, as I said before, is not actual evidence. Logically, when you can conclude that, you can also conclude on the very fact that, regardless of how little the chance is, regardless of how logical it may seem that it was by a design creator, the logic still remains that there is no evidence, and so therefore you are stuck with what I would like to call the theory of infinite possibilities, where you could say, yes, it was a design creator. You can say, no, it's not a design creator. You can say it was done by monkeys in space. You can say it was done by rocks. You can say it was done by jellyfish. Whatever theory you have can't be dismissed on the basis that no one can prove their theory is correct and no one can prove any theory is wrong. Why? Because we have no evidence. So subsequently, infinite possibilities. So why pick one over the other?
Because one has 10 straws in the cup and the other has not even a
They have no
straw.
evidence. They have no evidence
Well, I'm
either
saying if
or.
you had a chance, if you had a chance to 75% chance to win on this side and the other side loses, usually you're going to take the winning percentage side.
You can't win in an argument that has no basis in fact,
Well,
and
I'm
that's
not talking
where.
about I'm just saying going with the logical thing of
And
which side has chance.
for you to have that percentage to dismiss it as low chance or high chance, you have to have evidence for it. If you have
What
no
the
evidence,
like
then
the evidence of the sun and moon, as Isaac Newton said, did not happen by chance because of perfect distance where we don't burn up or freeze. There's many other things in the human enzyme. There's new stuff coming out all the time.
it's not even correct of how the Earth even came to be. That's even theoretical itself, because there's scientists who claim that the Earth was formed after two planets smashing, colliding together, and then formulating the core of our very planet that would later form life, and then waters began to rise. The moon hit the Earth's atmosphere, which some say was chunks. Some say was chunks of the former two planets that hit the Earth, that collided with each other. Others say that the moon was created from an asteroid that hit the Earth and got stuck in the Earth's gravitational pull.
Yeah,
Others
I hear
say,
you, but then you hear
yeah,
the scientists say, it's like a fallacy against science to say that order comes out of like random chaos explosions.
everything is theoretical,
No, I
regardless if you
know.
cannot prove it. So therefore, you can't have more
Well, if it's
chance of
scientifically
something that you can't
impossible
prove.
of something
What's
coming into
scientifically impossible?
that by a chaotic explosion creates intelligent design like this.
They actually don't ever claim that. In fact, the claim is that the destruction that can happen can contain certain components that have the chance of formulating life. For example, um, one theory of how the Earth came to, how life started, was actually due to a meteorite, which contains the components that. One theory of how life began was that a meteorite hit the Earth shortly after its formation, and the meteorite itself contained the natural components that are for harboring life, and that's partly what helped start the building blocks of life on Earth, with the cells and the fishes and so on and so forth. My
To the
point
human
being,
intelligent brain and
my
everything
point.
from around.
No, that's not. That doesn't happen until billions and billions of
Oh,
years
I
later.
know, but see, that's where
But
they got to hide behind the time thing.
Well, it's not really hiding behind it. It's where the working theory goes. Like,
No,
all
I
of this
know they
relates to
need the
time.
billions and billions of years. I know because they can't observe it. They don't know. It's a theory how that life could happen.
All of it is a theory, but my point is that they don't claim that it was due to chaos itself that and explosions that caused it. They say that the materials within the explosion itself formulates the crust of the earth, and then it slowly, after billions of years, moves up and forms rock, etc., and everything starts to come into being through its own formation. They
Like a
don't claim,
miracle.
not necessarily a miracle unless you're attributing miracle by chance. But
I know.
miracles tend to be related to, oh, this normally can't happen, but it happened anyways, despite the fact that it's impossible,
Mm.
rather than chance, where it's unlikely, but it can.
Yeah, for his troubles where he left the atheism. He said for the Darwin stuff, he said you have to believe that nothing produced everything, non-life produced life, randomness produces
Which is,
fine-tuning.
again, not true,
Well,
because
let me just get
atheism
to it.
means that
I know
atheism.
it's a broad statement. And there's many different atheists, but
There's not even a different category of atheism, except unless you're referring to atheism and agnostic atheism, and the only real difference there is that you combine your atheism with agnosticism.
yeah.
Um, but there's no different type. Well, here's what's cool. Here's the funny part about atheism is that because how atheism works, it has no doctrine, it has no collectiveness whatsoever, other than the universally agreed that there is no God. There's nothing
Mm-hmm.
connecting another atheist to another. So thereby, even if you pull up, oh, a former atheist turned theist says that to be an atheist, you must believe in this, you must believe nothing came from everything.
Well, he's
That is
saying what
not
he
factually
believes, so
correct.
I don't know what everyone believes. I'm just saying for him, and I do know a lot of atheists. If they believe nothing came from, they believe that came from nothing when it comes down to. So I'm just saying that randomness, fine tuning, that nothing produced everything, that chaos produced
I'm
information,
just telling.
unconsciousness produced consciousness, non-reason produced reason. The central pillars of evolution theory get rotted away quick.
I'm just trying to inform you that even if you pull up atheists or famous atheists saying stuff, it doesn't necessarily attribute to atheism itself or other atheists.
No, no, he's just saying his beliefs, and a lot of atheists believe that well, that's what you guys believe. He came from nothing.
Not necessarily true. Even if you have one atheist saying that, or even if you found that to be a common thing when you discuss with atheists, that's more or less a stereotype than an actuality. In actuality, an atheist doesn't believe in shit. Mostly because what makes an atheist to begin with is your lack of belief.
Yeah,
Anything
that you
else that
didn't
you believe
believe.
in,
Yeah, but
anything else
it's
that you believe in has nothing to do with atheism.
but it starts with the belief that you came from nothing and you produced by
No,
randomness.
it starts
Yeah, it
with the
starts with
disbelief in
something,
God.
and then it
No,
starts with
it starts with a
randomness and
disbelief.
chaos and time,
No,
billions of years.
no. It starts off with your disbelief in a God or or your creation from a God. All that is required for you to be an atheist is that you do not believe in any goddess, god, or deity of any kind. Not the devil, not God, not anybody.
I
Not the
know, and
Greek
that's what I'm
gods.
getting at.
Well, you're trying to say that it comes from you have to believe you came from nothing. That's not necessarily true. All you have to do is disbelieve that a God exists, let alone created you. It doesn't necessarily mean you believe you came from nothing, nor is that a required belief. And then you talk about billions of years, etc., etc. That's scientific theory, which again has nothing to do with atheism. Even if you argue that a lot of atheists actually use science to subject their disbelief with some different form of belief, it is still generally not connected with atheism.
Yeah, I mean, atheists is the total denial of God, but at the end of the day, since they didn't come from a creator, then they came from molecules, and then well, they just
Not
maybe they believe in
necessarily
nothing. All
having to
right,
believe
let's
in
go.
that.
All right,
Not
let's go.
necessarily having to
Okay,
believe in
let's
that.
just say they believe nothing. Okay,
That would actually be correct because
okay, then
atheist doesn't
believing
believe in
nothing,
anything.
and
Atheist doesn't
then
believe in anything.
oh, well, I know they don't have a truth.
You're not necessarily having a truth even if you believe.
Well, there's an actually, I believe I do have a absolute truth, but that's because I believe in the Bible and I believe it's proven.
That's your belief, but you cannot prove this belief, nor is it factual that your belief is correct. Hence why it's a belief to begin with.
It's labeled in the belief, but I'm just saying,
Then it
the
can't be
evidence.
absolute. Then it
Well,
can't be absolute. And the very idea that you say you have a absolute truth that you believe in contradicts it to be absolute, because if it's a belief, that means it's not actually true. It's just something you believe in. Now, it can be absolutely true that you believe your belief is true, but it will not factually or objectively be true, regardless of you believe in it or not.
because you don't think it can be proven, but I say it can be proven. It's just many reject it.
Then obviously it does not constitute as proof, because proof is something that, regardless of what someone hears or thinks about it, it is undeniable. Like, for a fact, you can tell me you don't believe in natural selection, yet your belief or disbelief in it will not matter, because it is actually proven. Whereas you believe in something and you believe that to be fact, and so you say that it's true. But someone who can clearly, like me, can say that because you can't prove that it's actually true, and I can reject it on the basis that it's only your belief, then it's not absolute, nor is it necessarily proven.
Well, I believe if it's shown, proven, and people have an open to accept it or not, but I'm just saying many reject it because the accountability goes in for purpose and creation right away, whether you know who that God is, with the conscious mind, that God has made himself known through the things made, so man is left without excuse. But I think deep down, I don't believe in atheists. I believe deep down they know the truth, that they didn't come from
Well,
nothing. I believe they
here's
know.
another thing about atheism is it doesn't begin with a belief, so it doesn't matter if you believe in an atheist or not. Some who states they do not believe in any deity whatsoever is in fact an atheist, because by definition it is a lack of belief in God. Simply because you don't agree with that mindset, or you may think that you don't truly believe that they think that, is completely irrelevant.
No, I know that's just the world we live in, but humans and sin and want to do our own thing or whatever. But ultimately, the evidence and proof is to be rejected by the majority because it's not comfortable
It's
truth.
not constant to it does not constitute evidence if someone is capable of denying it.
So you could find some truth in the world that absolutely sits horribly wrong with people, and they'll sit there and deny it. Like there's been truths that came out about stuff in the world or government's done that people absolutely deny, no matter all the documents of proof, because it don't sit well with them. So I wouldn't say
Well, you
people a
can't
bunch of yes men.
absolutely prove that what you're saying, if you can't absolutely prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that what you're saying is absolutely true, or the evidence you produce is true, because there's a little thing called false evidence where you say you have evidence for something, people look at that evidence, but then don't see it as absolutely, not see it as credible evidence. For example, when a theist says that he has absolute proof and his proof is based on the Bible, which his evidence is based on the Bible, I, as an atheist, reject that on the basis that your evidence is invalid due to the fact that you can't prove God created the Bible or inspired man to, and the only thing that is factual is that men created the Bible. It is words of man, and the claim is that it was words of man inspired by or instructed to be written by a God that you cannot prove. And so, therefore, even if you give me Bible as evidence, I can reject that on the basis that you can't prove God did that in fact.
That he used his creation to make himself known, that he used the Ruach HaKodesh, which is supernatural, the Holy Spirit, and says no prophecy ever came from the will of man. There's over 300 prophecies about Jesus Christ where crucified. Harvard did a study, just a man fulfilling 8 of them possible, and they're all in the old ancient scripts. So, and then so much so they prophesied this stuff, God using men, to where God actually became flesh and walked this earth
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
amongst us, and fulfilled all those prophecies,
Uh-huh,
and his kingdom was not of this world, and God
uh-huh,
actually came down to this earth and fulfilled
uh-huh,
those prophecies, and there's still over 2,000 prophecies because he says, I'm the
uh-huh.
God that declares the end. on the all-knowing God. Well, if we're
Uh-huh.
here to look at the Bible and see the divine fingerprints of all the prophecies and how all-knowing He is,
Uh-huh.
that's the form of proof. And also in
That's not
Romans,
proof
there's a
at
form.
all. That's not proof at all. That's quoting the Bible, but that's not actual proof.
Well, if you go by the manuscripts and Jesus fulfilling that when it
Well,
was written,
the problem with the manuscripts is that you can't prove that God actually wrote it. You can only prove that someone who believes in Jesus and God wrote it. But that's not proof that the deity that they worship actually happened or
is
is
it proof
true.
actually God used His creation to make Himself known, and so much so that God actually came down and walked amongst us?
See, you're using New Scripture, which basically states that God is Jesus, and Old Testament states that Jesus is God. So
No, I
why
could show you in the Old Testament He's God, but I mean,
it doesn't make a difference to me because I reject it because you can't prove that it's true.
you can keep saying that, but I mean, it's not like someone have to sit there for months and months and studying the prophecies and say, well, what's the chance? And then absolutely zero chance gets ruled out that this is the God who He said He is. This is the God of Scripture. This is the one who fulfilled the prophecies. This was the one that
You can't
historically
even
existed.
prove the God himself. Like, is there DNA? Do you see him anywhere? No. So you
Oh,
can't
because
even
you can't put
prove.
Him under a microscope, but you could put all His design and His intelligence under it.
No, you can. No, you're using the fact that a Bible scripture quotes him using creation, which you categorize as all of evolution, scientific theory, nature itself, and use that as circular logical reasoning to say, well, since the Bible says he uses his creations to prove himself, and by biblical standards, everything is God's creation, and you have natural selection and evolution proving and providing evidence for quote unquote intelligent design, then you use all of this to the logical conclusion that scientific evidence of evolution is signs of God because he proves himself through his creations, which I can reject completely as nothing more than using biblical literature and logical fallacy on the basis that because you see natural selection and evolution and consider it intelligent design, that doesn't mean that it's the same concept as what the Bible is saying, nor that what the Bible is saying is valid. As I said before, it's words of man.
Well, it's not just man that makes it, it was God too, and making Himself known, and so much so where He walked amongst, He actually speaked on this planet. It wasn't just men; He actually came down and
You
dwelt
can't
among
prove
us.
that, though. You can't
Jesus,
prove that,
well, I
though.
can prove He has historically existed. He lined up with 300
No,
prophecies.
you can maybe historically prove in a document somewhere that a person by the name of Jesus Nazareth may have existed in some period of human history, and even then that's debatable. But even if you produce that, you have no way to prove that the Jesus of Nazareth you'll find in an actual historical document is in fact the Son of God, or that any of the miracles happened, or that he is God, or that he walked amongst us at one point. That is the point of this. You have faith that what the Bible is saying is true, but you have no actual evidence.
Well, as I said, faith in the Greek is trust and confidence, and we have confidence that God made Himself known on His
Trust
spine.
trust is not the same as knowing. Trust and confidence, these are just semantics for another word of faith.
I know, and faith goes into every man. The Bible says
Which
knows God, knows the Creator. It says knowledge. Knowledge is knowing. The whole Bible is full of knowledge.
which
The
is a
word knowledge.
contradiction because if you cannot prove the God in question, then you cannot have knowledge of said being. You only have knowledge of the biblical characterization of said being through biblical literature, but you have no way of proving that said literature is true or that it is factual. So knowledge would actually side against, because faith is actually the opposite of knowledge by definition. Knowledge means requires you to know. Faith means to believe without knowing. And even if you try to change the words around to say, well, word Greek means trust and confidence, not just blind faith, it still would not be knowing. You trust that this God exists. You are confident that this God exists, but you don't know. So it's another
Well,
way
the
of
Bible
faith.
states we do know, and it's just the play of Greek words in our day and age.
If you know, then there should be evidence, right?
To me, I've seen tons of evidence.
to you, but I'm talking about
I know.
objectively.
I'm not talking about people that don't devote their lives to studying scriptures and prophecies and intelligent design and actually looking for truth, on absolute truth. But
It's not
you know,
absolute. I can reject it, and therefore it's not absolute.
you can. But I'm just saying that truth don't come to someone like that. So and it's not supposed to.
Truth is actually evidence, which is supported by facts. You need to have a fact in order to have evidence. And if you have no
Okay.
fact, if you have no fact, then you have no evidence. If you have no evidence, then there can be no truth.
Well, evidence-wise, what Christians bring to the table, like I said, intelligent design, but not only that, Jesus fulfilled all those messianic prophecies. He is who he claimed to be, and it
You
lines up with
can
history
you
when it was written. That's evidence. That's eyewitness
no
accounts. Yeah, that's
no
evidence.
you're using biblical scripture and the biblical historical claim that Jesus once walked on the earth and that he is God to say, well, he committed all these things. There's even a disbelief that Jesus ever even existed,
I know, and
or that even
historians laughed at that.
not necessarily.
Top
There's
ones
plenty
have.
of not really, because what you consider historians most likely are just biblical scripture people who studied the Bible and are actually Bible scholars,
No,
which are not
actually,
necessarily great historians.
well, no, it's the pagan historians that all agree Jesus crucified on the cross. Every single one known, the only one that rejects it is the Muslim ones. But all talk about his
Muslims don't reject Jesus either. They actually
no, I'm
do
saying
believe
his
in Jesus.
crucifixion.
They don't reject that either. The
Yeah,
only
they
thing
do,
that they reject is that they believe that Jesus was a prophet. They don't believe that he
and they
was
reject
the
that
God or
he
Son of God.
didn't die on the cross; that he was taken up into heaven. I know what they believe.
I've actually spoken to many Islamics, and they never stated that. They've stated that they believe Jesus was a prophet. They just reject the idea of Jesus being the Son of God.
Well, just because they didn't tell you I'm just telling that's their belief. Especially
But
Ravi Zacharias, who talks to them all the
it's
time.
completely
But
irrelevant because all I've already told you plenty of times. I reject the Bible on the basis that you can't prove the Bible.
well, I say the Bible is proven for those that seek it and want evidence.
Well, that is just saying that you willingly believe it through your faith, but that is not absolute
No, I
evidence.
believe. Okay, that's like me saying I'm just going to believe this Bible, but never study and devote my life to studying the truth of it, all the messianic prophecies, the history of when it was written, all the historical events, Jesus and everything else, all the historical evidence of the crucifixion, and the resurrection of 500 witnesses, and it just taken off like
It's
wildfire.
literally debated in history whether what the Bible claims happened in history actually did happen. Like, for example, the book of Joshua in Judaism. If you ever read the book of Joshua, it tells you that historically, after Moses frees the Jews from Egyptian controls, he brings them to the promised land. They reject the promised land, so God punishes them by going to the desert for 40 years, where they more or less basically survive by eating magical flying poop known as manna coming from the sky, and they survive on that for 40 years. Then they go back to the promised land, having fulfilled their punishment, having lived out their sentence, and then afterward, Moses having died at this time, his assistant Joshua leads the new leader of the children of Israel, go back to the promised land, but are unable to enter due to the fact that the city of Jericho has been founded. They demand that they release the city of Jericho because God has given them his land. Jericho refuses, and that night Joshua is met by by a seraphim, I think seraphim Gabriel or some other type of angel who tells them that who instructs him that God has delivered Jericho into his hands. March around the city for 3 days and 4 nights, and on the seventh day, um, go and have the priest blow the trumpets and the horns and give a loud shout. Have faith in God, and the walls of Jericho will collapse, and the city will be yours. And biblically, they claim that happened. Now, I will reject that story absolutely completely on multiple factors. One, there is absolutely no proof, nor does the can has this ever actually happened where God sent a God of all knowing power sends poop from the ground, known as manna, to feed people in the desert. What is a fact is that these people who were supposedly there did have food and water and goats and other type of provisions to survive. So we can already tell that the claim of manna is not true. Then that would make what the book of Joshua says historically incorrect. Then you could look into the fact that they're claiming that a entire city of Jericho collapsed by simply walking around it for 7 days, shouting loudly and blowing trumpets for 7 days, caused the city to collapse and allowing the Israelites to ascend to the promised land and take over Jericho with no military force
Well,
whatsoever.
we could back up a bit, right? Before that,
Hmm.
we know that it was highly doubted about the plagues in Egypt, and it was even by a documentary put out by historians and stuff of the papyrus they found in Egypt that
Hmm.
described all the plagues that happened there from the
And
God of
even
Israel.
even if you find that, even if you find that there was in fact some period of time where plagues happened in Israel, in Egypt,
Like
sorry, in
supernatural
Egypt,
type of level, not just
no,
just a little thing went
diseases
by.
diseases are never supernatural. Like they said the same thing about the bubonic plague in the 13th century, where people were literally dying, and they were saying, "Oh, it had to be God's punishment." And what happened? Um, and what happened? They claimed that the Jews poisoned the wells. They claimed that it was due to God being angry with them, that their morality was declined, and as a result, this led to mass execution of Jews, persecutions, the rising of the inflatulence, which only helped to spread the disease further. And in reality, it was not a supernatural cause or phenomenon. It was actually due to rats carrying fleas that had bubonic plague, and it was spread due to the fact that that it spread from Asia. The Mongols attacked the city of Kaffa. After failing to take the city, they threw their infected dead. Um, they proved the infected dead. They flung the infected dead, diseased with said bubonic plague, into the city where fleeing merchants who were then contaminated with the plague, but due to the fact that those with bubonic plague can go a whole week before showing any symptoms, didn't know they had the plague, sailed all the way to mainland into first it arrived in Macedonia and Sicily, um, and by the time city officials realized what was going on, the rats had already gotten off the ships and started infecting people. They went and prayed to the Holy Mother, the Virgin Mary, which did absolutely nothing. And then it was when spread from Macedonian to
Well,
the rest of Italy.
how are you getting all the way in that part? We're talking about the papyrus found into
Right,
ancient
right.
Egypt.
Well, no, I'm saying that you claim that it was a supernatural cause.
Yeah,
I denied
everything's
that.
in
I
there.
denied
Darkness
that.
and night,
I
havoc,
denied that.
fire, supernatural things, death
I
of all
denied
firstborn.
I denied that I denied that because plagues are never of supernatural origin, and
Because
and
you're
I
an
give
atheist.
you no because it's factual. I even gave you the bubonic plague, which was at the time believed to be supernatural and believed to be a punishment from God, and in reality, medical science knows for a fact that this is not true. So
Okay, I'm saying
by that conclusion, if the plagues really were happening, um, if the plagues really were happening in Egypt, why say that it was a supernatural phenomenon when
well,
that
it's
could be
God's
perfectly
judgment.
medical? You
Well, there's
can't
10
prove that it
things
was
that have
God's
to go. That
judgment.
has to go with the darkness, the firstborn, all dying, mosquitoes, havoc, fire, boils, water in the blood, frogs, lice, flies, cicada. So all 10 of those things.
You can find scientific with enough evidence, you can find scientific evidence to explain why that happened.
With fire, havoc coming down, darknesses of nights and days.
Yeah,
While all these things are happening at once, to let go of the Israelites at the same
you
time.
don't necessarily know that it happened at once. It could have been a period of many months in actuality, but the document doesn't mention every specific detail of what happened. In reality, even when it says, oh, the firstborn children dying, there could have been many, many other people dying, and they just didn't write it.
Oh, there were a bunch of people dying in the firstborn. So and there's the release of the Israelites where they did have them captured. There's a bunch of recordings of that by Egypt that they did capture Israelites and that they did release them. But brought about Israel, a real historical place.
You can't prove that the causes were supernatural or that the
All right,
plagues
let's say they're
themselves,
not, but whatever it was caused them to reach some Israelites and to lead up to
which
Israel.
which could have completely nothing related to it.
So it's just a good old luck and chance. I mean, there's so many things you just throw
Plagues,
away
plagues
with
and
chance.
diseases, plagues and diseases are not chance, nor do they happen of a supernatural cause. Never.
I'm not
You
saying they
have to
always
be.
do.
They never do. That's the point.
Well, I'm just saying you're making a truth claim now because you never
No,
were.
I'm not making a truth
You
claim.
didn't
I'm making a
exist for
factual claim
2,000 years and
because
witness everything that's happened.
medical science, that same logic could be used against you to point out that you have no proof. You were not there 2,000 years to objectively say that it was God and the several plagues. So if you want to play that route, it'll go either way. But my point of being is that medical science already debunks the idea that magic and supernatural can ever cause plagues and diseases, etc., etc. We know for a fact medical
Yeah,
science,
but you're making an absolute truth claim based on what you can put
and
under a microscope. You're denying that there's something deeper to reality that has been seen throughout man.
I'm denying the possibility of supernatural cause plagues on the basis that medical science already proves, and this is the difference between biblical and actual and science, is that it actually proves that it can't happen. If you went to any biologist, if you went to any medical doctor of any kind and went to them and said, Doctor, I'm suffering from an illness, and I believe it is of supernatural origin because I disobeyed the God that I worship, or I didn't do what God said to do, they will laugh at you.
Of course,
Or if they
no,
don't
no, no.
laugh
We're
at you, if they
talking
don't
about
laugh at you,
we're talking
they
about this
will.
event. I'm not talking about maybe down in India they got sick from rats or something, and then
Mhm.
that's to way that is God's judgment too. But I'm just saying to say that we don't have science to back up it's from rats or this that third like you're stating. I'm saying this event for the Israelites, this particular event.
Which, again, even if did to some extent did happen, there is no way to prove that the plagues that you are describing don't have a scientific medical explanation not currently known at that time, henceforth the superstition that it was of God's wrath.
Yeah, because we see recordings in there in the Egypt, and we see it in the Bible, and we see it both
So what, it was
sides.
written in a Bible, that doesn't make it
No, and the
factual.
papyrus, because Egypt records everything, so they used to doubt it
Uh,
for a while till they found it, and all the archaeological findings,
And
nor the
again,
here.
what they thought would have been supernatural. What you're referring to in Egypt is a time way before medical science is even much of an industry. Like back then, if a doctor were to see you and you had some sort of, let's say, internal hemorrhaging, an Egyptian doctor could do nothing for you. If you got bit by a mosquito and you got malaria from the Nile, a doctor could do nothing for you. All you could do is have a priest worship Ra and of the many gods that they worshipped, to hopefully heal you from your medical condition. When in reality, the only thing that would have saved you in that situation is one or two things: either the antibiotics that is already anti-immunity cells that is in your system already, or medical science and medical antibiotics that you would not get at that current time. So even if you use, it's read in the Bible and they found in papyrus them believing the same thing, the thought that the plagues are of a supernatural origin or God's wrath is just the belief.
Okay,
There is
I'm
no
all right.
proof.
Well, let's just say you reject the supernatural. God did this, but I'm just saying it is
Hmm.
recorded that these two events happened, what led to them releasing the Israelites. And there's a bunch of documentaries on the path to
Okay.
Exodus and all the historical findings near the river.
Okay.
And they did scientifically prove that where the sea parts and how there's like a sandbar there with the wind,
Okay.
and it sometimes does split the Red Sea. Um,
Okay.
but I'm just saying I believe it's all from God, but I'm just
Right, and
saying.
I understand that that's your belief, but that's where I'm saying it is just that, a belief. It is not absolutely true, nor is it objectively true, nor is it absolute. It is simply your belief that while I do respect, I will completely reject and argue with you as fact.
I know, and I reject your beliefs, but as
I
it
don't
goes,
have a belief, that's the problem. I
all
don't
right.
have a
Well, I
belief.
have a belief, and know what I know is true, and you just reject it being true because I don't expect you just to say it's true, obviously.
Well, you believe in your beliefs, and you believe that your beliefs are true, and I respect that. Um, I don't. I reject your beliefs on the basis that I have a disbelief. I disagree with you, and henceforth I reject your beliefs. But that doesn't mean that's not equivalent to me denying truth or fact, because you, like every other theist and every other person on earth, have no evidence to support any theocratic belief at all. You have your belief, you have your documentation, and you have your logic and conclusion based on it. But you do not objectively know, nor can you prove what you believe is true. At the same time, neither what I disbelieve can be absolutely true that a God doesn't exist, but I do not claim that. I just claim that there is no proof.
Well, I mean, I believe that the Bible is proven, and God is. I know you're going to reject that and making a
Mhm.
truth claim, and I know you're going to keep rejecting it, but
Well, I
that's
will
it's from what I
because
researched and seen and done. And me, I don't know what you know, and I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff you know I have no idea, and the stuff I know you have no idea about. So it's hard to say that I don't have no truth or what I seen based
well,
upon the Bible or God.
you don't have objective truth, meaning simply because you believe it doesn't make it true, and that
Well, that's
applies
not
to
why I'm
everyone.
saying it's true.
Well, essentially, that's what you're doing by saying that. Well, I've committed my own research to it by based on what I know is true. Then it's objectively true. It's not objectively true. It's true that you believe it to be true, but a belief is never true. Belief is actually the opposite of knowing.
I'm just saying when I watch the debates and worldviews,
Hmm.
it's held down. I seen the truth on their side, and I did my own research and intelligent design, the chances and proof as
Hmm.
total, and studying the Bible. So I'm leaning on the side of I believe is on my side is the evidence and that the likeliness of this place happening by chance, without a designer, is very very low, and you're on the losing side big time, I believe.
I'm not really on a losing side because if you're unable to prove the God that you are claiming to be so objectively true, then this is just going to be a stalemate. You can't prove what you believe. I can't prove what I disbelieve.
Well,
So
I mean,
therefore, it's
I
always
can
going to
make a
be a
whole thing
stalemate.
for like 3 hours on why I believe it's true with proofs, but I'm not going to do that right here.
Well, it's not going to make a difference. I don't know where this simple fact doesn't come. I don't know where this simple concept eludes you. You can't prove the God that you worship. You can't prove he does exist in fact, nor can any other theist. I, as an atheist, reject the idea of God for that specific reason. And so, therefore, anything that you claim to be objectively true biblically or by your own belief, I will reject on the basis that the fact that it's a belief, it is not truth. And that is simply your belief, of which, of course, I do respect.
And do you
And
believe what you believe to be true?
I don't believe in anything, that's the difference.
Well, you're making statements like you do.
No, I'm making statements about my disbelief. Disbelief, lack thereof. I don't believe in a deity, so where I'm speaking from it is a disbelief. You believe in a deity, so you are making you are making presumptions based on your belief. I am making statements based on my disbelief.
Okay, is anything true?
Of what?
I don't know about
Because
life and just.
it depends on what you're talking about. Like, is medical science true? Hell yes, it is because there's evidence for it. Is evolution true? Hell yes, because there's evidence for it. Is God true? No, because there's no evidence for it. There's only belief.
I do believe there's many, many, many highly educated people, scholars and philosophers and scientists that provide evidence for God, and whether people want to reject it or
There are
accept it.
many people who are highly educated and yet they believe in a God, and that's true. And they use their logic and reasoning as their evidence for God, and they can even
And
try to use
science,
science.
and yeah, and
There's no
human enzyme.
science. There's no science to say God exists in fact. In fact, science doesn't even exist for that specific purpose. Science exists
It
and
should.
that it doesn't. Science is actually the opposite of theology. Theology basically exists where it believes in God and tries to explain the nature of divinity. Science exists in that it tries to explain the natural world and the phenomenon of its environment. Basically, what it tries to do is, why does the Earth spin on its axis? That's science. Why do plate tectonics shift the Earth? That's science. Why does Ebola attack the immunity cells? That's science. It does not exist for the specific purpose of proving God, nor can it be used to prove God.
But it has been.
No, it hasn't.
Well, the professor out of Cotton with human enzymes said, it's like a zero chance. It has to be a designer. Pretty much
He
laid it
can
out
he can claim that all he wants, but
with
science does
evidence, not
not.
just say, "Hey, I believe this human enzyme thing."
There is no evidence in science. Human
Okay,
enzymes don't
so
even prove anything other. Don't even prove, like, human enzymes are basically just enzymes. Basically, like, you know how you did you know that there's an enzyme in milk that humans have a hard time digesting with, that makes a lot of people lactose intolerant?
yeah, but the human enzyme itself is like the building block of the whole
That's not even.
thing.
Oh God, no, dude. That is actually false completely. Anybody who's ever studied biology knows that the cell is the basic unit of life. It's not.
Yeah,
The
it's the
enzyme
building
is not the
block of the
base.
cell. I got it confused.
Yeah,
But
I don't know. I don't know where you got the enzyme is the building block of life. That is not true.
well, I'm just saying the evidence he put together for it described that it could not happen by chance. It took a design.
No, actually, science can actually point to where it could happen by chance, like the whole fact of natural selection. Due to evolution's uncontrollable nature, natural selection is all happening by chance.
And it's observable, and it's which Christians would agree that things remain its own kind and they can adapt.
It all happens by chance, though.
I don't believe it happened by chance.
It doesn't matter if you believe it happened by chance or not. It's a fact. If there is the whole way natural selection is proven is that by random chance, the natural environment that you currently live in changes, and you are going to die from that natural changes due to your inevitability to adapt to the new changes, or B, you're going to survive due to your genetic superiority to survive through natural selection.
Yeah, I mean,
Whether you believe it to be chance or by a divine creator makes no difference.
yeah, I mean, I just go with what I've seen for evidence of God by scientists and other stuff.
Which is
And
perfectly fine by you, but you
I know
can't.
I'm not
Mm-hmm.
forcing you to say, "Yeah, man, I'll believe that."
Mm-hmm.
And you
Mm-hmm.
you research what you research, and I don't know
Right.
what you know. So I mean, I think we'll just have to.
Mm-hmm.
I just hit something. Am I still on?
Yeah, you're still on. Can you hear me? Hello? Oh. Yeah, man. Try to rejoin. Mm. Hit out the app. Okay.